Good morning, everyone. Welcome on our webinar on the cyber attacks on the Windows operating system. Let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Jan Marek, and I am the solution architect in KPCS, and I'm responsible for the deployment of Microsoft solutions for the administration of Windows operating systems and for their security and deployment. I'm also the trainer and co-founder of CyberRange security community. I'm the author of my own tool called Hypercracker, which is used to demonstrate some security process misconfigurations on the Hyper-V level. And I'm mainly focusing on the Windows client and Windows server security, digital forensics on the Microsoft operating systems, and automation using the Windows PowerShell. And mainly, I'm focusing on the Windows kernel and its security features and the features that are dependent on the level of the configuration of the hardware. So that's my main focus. So what are we going to look at today? It's quite short agenda. We will take a look at the local attacks, so the different types of attack vectors on the physical operating system when you have the physical access to the computer. Then we will continue with the options, how to attack the Microsoft Drive encryption, full drive encryption solution, which is called Microsoft BitLocker, and how to protect also against those attacks. Then we will focus on the credential extensions, different aspects of those features, how these credentials and those confidential secrets are stored in the computer and the memory, and how can they be extracted using some various tools, and again, how to protect using the built-in Windows operating system features. And we'll end up with the firewall malware, which is these days is very common attack vector for the user sensitive data, documents, and how to get a foothold on the client operating system to harvest the data or to harvest the credentials and therefore attack or access some cloud-based services, for example, Office 365, Azure AD, and so on. So let's start with the local attacks. Maybe the short note is that if you have any questions, please write them down to the chat window in the webinar room, and I will try to answer them in the end of the webinar. Okay? So let's start with the local attacks. So because the client operating system is running on the end user devices, it's quite hard to protect those when they leave the on-premises of the company, which is basically focused on the mobile computers like laptops, tablets, and of course personal computer for you today is the mobile phone, because it's running the mainly the same strong operating system as your desktop or laptop computer. And those client computers, because they regularly leave the premises of the infrastructure of the building of the company, and because they can be stolen, and they can be there for attacks using their physical ports like USB ports, keyboards, or access to the hard drive and so on. So it's quite important to consider those clients as compromised at first, because user can do a lot of stuff by himself using Google, using YouTube, and do some stuff at home, or this device can be stolen, and therefore the thief or attacker can try to harvest or utilize some kind of tools to harvest the data from the client or harvest the credentials, and therefore use them to access some other services. The first big point with the physical security is the existence of keyloggers. Because mainly today a lot of companies, a lot of employees and users are still using passwords to sign into their devices. They are not using biometrics or pins and so on, which is now offered in the Windows operating system. But because there is quite a lot of big there's quite a big base, installation base of the old operating system, for example, Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and so on. They don't have those features enabled or even available inside the core Windows operating system. So it's quite hard to protect those kinds of devices against those attacks. But as I said, a lot of users today, a lot of employees, even when they are using the new operating system, Windows 10 operating system, that's possible to use those biometrics-based authentications or identifications of the user. They are still using passwords. So keyloggers are quite a big deal today still, because they can be used to harvest the keystrokes by the user, and then like try to combine those keystrokes and try to create some like sentences or strings and try to find some like login information or credentials and so on. Keyloggers, basically quite a lot of customers today, or quite a lot of devices, not customers, quite a lot of devices are today very well protected against those hardware keyloggers, because when you are using some tablet or laptops, they have keyboards directly attached like to the screen and to the underlying like hardware. So there is no way how to place some kind of USB keylogger between the keyboard and the computer, because these are connected using some internal buses and so on. So some example of this hardware keylogger can be very small device, which you can see on the left side corner on the bottom of the presentation. Basically, this USB is very small device, so it can be quite easily hidden in the desktop computer of the user, connected and used as the interconnection for the keyboard. And as you can see, you can see that this specific keylogger is capable of sending those data away using the Wi-Fi connection. So the attacker doesn't need to go back to the computer and get the keylogger back and extract the data from the hardware itself, but this can be used like in online communication, and the attacker can use the online communication with the keylogger to get the data from it. So that's some quite like really basic stuff. How to protect against those hardware keyloggers? You can use some different kinds of security solutions or features that are today built into the client antivirus or anti-malware applications or system that you have installed on your computer. These can detect and block some kind of like weird devices, but it's quite hard to do that meantime with those keyloggers, because they are impersonating them as a keyboard. So the agent of the antivirus or anti-malware is not able to get the ID of this device, because it's simulating it's a keyboard. But still, some agents or some different keyloggers can be detected this way. So how to protect them? Like the proactive protection is quite hard to do it, but you can do some like surveillance in your offices and try to take a look if like on a weekly basis if there are no like this kind of malicious devices connected to your desktops. And of course you should instruct the user to check the computer before the user sign into it and use some peripherals and so on, and to ask him to create some like ticket if the user can see some kind of weird device that was not connected before to the computer. Okay? So keyloggers. Another stuff is that when you have the physical access to the computer and you are not local administrator on the device, you can try different techniques how to become the local administrator. One of them is to utilize some kind of exploit, either locally using the USB or remotely using another computer, or you can use some like built-in hacks that are available in the operating system, how to become the administrator. One of those hacks can be that you will replace some like system components that are capable to run in the login screen of the Windows. So, for example, one of them is definitely, for example, the easy of access tool. I got some like basic lab scenario here. The red computer is the unprotected one, and the blue computer is the protected one. So we will use it in the demo somehow. So one of these hacks can be to replace the good old utilman.exe file, which is stored in the Windows folder, with the CMD. Of course, you aren't able to do it in the running operating system because this is like protected file in the Windows. So you need to boot to Windows PE or to Windows installation media, which is running Windows PE as well, and try to replace this utilman.exe with the CMD.exe file. And because you replace this component, you are basically replacing the feature that's available in the login screen, which is the easy of access, which you can see in the right-hand corner on the bottom of the sign-in screen, which, like, the standard behavior is that it will just pop up the window and it can try to, or it can help you to magnify the screen, control the computer with voice, and configure the high contrast and so on. But because you replace this utilman.exe with the CMD, what happens when you click on the easy of access that you will start the CMD console, command line window console. And because nobody is logged into the computer, the only entity that can be used to run this process is the system entity. So basically you are running the CMD file in the system context, and therefore you are administrator even when you have no user with the administrator right. And using some like basic command like net user and so on, you can configure the user, enable local administrator, or try to become the local administrator with your regular domain user account. I know that there can be a lot of like restrictions in the group policy to control the membership of those groups and so on, but let's visualize it the simple way that you can replace some component and you can then utilize the command line or shell with the administrator right. Today it's not available anymore to use this kind of hack on the patched systems because Microsoft Windows operating system is protecting itself against running another files that were replaced with these components. So when you try to do it today with the utilman.exe, you will not be successful to run the CMD file after clicking on the easy of access window. So it's quite protected in the Windows right now, this kind of attack. Different kind of attack can be to escalate your privileges. So when you get the privileges of local administrator, or you already are local administrator, you can try to configure the Windows the way then after somebody else will interactively log on to your computer or log on using remote desktop services, basically it will run some script that was hidden against this user, and this script is run in the context of this signed-in user. So you can use different kind of approaches to this like attack vector. I will show you just maybe the simplest one. You can use, for example, the registry entries to configure the run key, which will start after the user logs on. But you can use even simpler techniques, where you are utilizing the task scheduler in the Windows operating system. Try to run it right now, and you can either try to reconfigure the existing scheduled tasks that are like available in the Windows operating system after installation, and try to modify the actions or configuration of the scheduled task. Or you can create even a new task, of course, but when you modify the existing one, it's quite more hidden against the detection, for the detection. So I will just demo the creation of the new task. And what's really smart, or what's really nice on the task scheduler window is that you can configure to run the defined task under a specific group or user. So when I select groups, but I will select the Active Directory, and it will change the filter, so I need to configure it back to groups. And I can, for example, it's quite like hardcore scenario right now, but you can try to configure the task to be run as the user who's member of domain admins. And then you can define the trigger that will say that this task will start. Sorry, it's quite slow now. So it will start at logon. So when the user who's member of the domain admins group logs on, it will start some action. And the action mainly used here is to run PowerShell.exe with the no profile, no exit, execution policy bypass parameters, and then try to run some, maybe the clear text code, or even the obfuscated code, and try to do something that you need to do under the domain admin rights. For example, escalate your privileges from the domain user rights to domain admin rights, or create another object in the Active Directory, and so on. Of course, when you create this task, you need to pursue somebody who's member of this domain admin to log into your computer. But because the company is not using the right tiering of those credentials for those different accounts, basically the domain admins are using the same account for reading their emails, as well as running their AD consoles, as well as managing computers in the infrastructure. It's quite a big stuff today still in the organizations. So you just can call the help desk guys and tell, my computer is not printing, please try to fix it. And mainly they are trying to connect remotely, or even they get to your office and logged in interactively to your computer, and then they start this like script. Of course, the script will be configured the way that it's not easy to see it running, so it's minimized, not interactive window, and so on. And of course, you can detect the actions that are done by the script or by the code itself in the target system. So even if I get the domain admin membership, it can be detected on the AD domain controllers using like built-in event logging and so on. So that's some kind of like maybe the start of the lateral movement, because I got the physical control on the device, and I escalated the privileges to the local administrator, and therefore I escalated them to the domain admins, for example. But I can use different approaches, of course, some like hidden user accounts or objects in AD that are visible only for the domain control system account, so they can be replicated and so on. So there are different approaches that this can be really, really good hidden against those detections. So another big stuff is the attack to the disk encryption. Because when you want to have your computer as secure as possible, you need to start with the basic principle that says that the user must not be the member of local administrator. The user cannot be the local administrator, and not or, and the disk level encryption must be enforced on the operating system drive. So these two components are very critical to provide the basic security for the client operating system. Do not allow users to be local administrators, do not configure them to be local administrators, and enforce disk encryption for the operating system drives. And with these two components, you are automatically blocked against those offline attacks on the disk, because this is encrypted. And because the user is not local administrator, he is not able to decrypt the drive and then do some offline attacks and so on. So this has to be the combination of those two. And user is not local administrator, and operating system disk drive is encrypted, always encrypted. But still, even if you have this configuration, there are kind of different approaches how to get to those data that are encrypted using the BitLocker, for example. I will try to describe two of them. The first one is some kind of evil loader, and the second one is some playing some games with the TPM. So the first one, which is in my slide called evil loader, is basically that I'm replacing the default boot device with my own malicious boot loader. And in this scenario, the computer is not equipped with the TPM chip. So when you have computer without the TPM drive and you want to use the BitLocker drive encryption, you get two options. You can just configure the startup key, which is basically the password that you will provide before the operating systems will start loading, or you can use USB flash drive that you need to connect to the computer when it starts booting and so on. So this is the scenario when the startup key is required, and that's the usual behavior. So when the user restarts the computer, he needs to provide a password that will unlock the keys, and those keys are therefore used to communicate with the drive that's encrypted with the BitLocker. So the user is that's a normal behavior for the user to provide the password to the system. But what you can see in the right-hand side of the screen of the presentation, this is not the real component or the real window that's provided to you to provide the password to the BitLocker. That's my own window. So it's the same for the user. It's quite okay to provide a password, but what my loader is doing is that we'll just record the password, write it down to the disk or to the flash drive or somewhere else, and then pass through the password to the operating system. So from the user perspective, the behavior is still the same. It's protected. It's unlocking the drive. Everything is rolling. It's working. But the problem is that I already have the password, the startup key. So then I can just store the device or store the drive and just use the password to unlock the drive. It's not as easy as this way, but you can visualize the next steps. So how to protect against this? Basically, the basic protection is to use the secure boot. So that's quite important for companies. For example, when they are doing in-place upgrades of the existing Windows 7 operating systems to Windows 10, to switch the BIOS to the native boot, to the FI boot, and then enforce the secure boot. Configure the secure boot and enforce it in the Windows operating system installation. Because without that, you are not protected against those injected bootloaders during the process of the booting of the computer boot up process. Okay? So another attack vector can be the direct memory access attack. So I'm just connecting. So the scenario is that somebody can connect some various devices using the USB ports or Thunderbolt ports or USB-C ports and so on, and those ports can provide the direct memory access. So I can read or in some way even manipulate the pages without accessing the operating system. I'm just using it from the port. Which has to be DMA enabled. And these attacks, you can see some kind of POC on the top, on the right of the presentation, which is called PCI leech. You can download the code, you can create the device by yourself, or you can buy it, for example, or you can use existing devices like Raspberry Pi and so on, or Arduino to run this code. And this is basically, as you can see, extracting the data from the memory from some internal bus. So it can be USB, it can be a motherboard, and so on. How to protect against those DMA attacks? It's quite easy. The first thing is to use the modern operating system Windows 10, because Windows 10, for example, in the BitLocker scenario, when you are not logged in, when you are not logged into the computer, those DMA ports are automatically deactivated on those devices. So even when you connect something, the operating system stops accessing the DMA functions of this port. The same behavior applies when you lock the screen. When you lock the computer, those DMA ports are blocked, and so when you leave your computer and somebody else will try to harvest the data from the memory, those DMA ports are blocked. So this is a native feature of DMA, but of course it can be like cracked using different approaches. So it's quite important today to implement some technologies like device guard and exploit guard, and these technologies with the combination of IOMMU or Intel VTD, which is the queued invalidations, can protect the memory against those like unwanted reads and even the writes. And the last scenario can be to use, because I still got the physical access to the computer, to use some USB device that's simulating that the keyboard or that it is the Ethernet device, like network card, network port, and in the keyboard mode, this device, which for example in my slide is called Bash Bunny, you can buy or create your own USB flash drive, and you can see it in the middle of the presentation. It's quite a big USB flash drive or USB device, and in the USB in the keyboard mode, it can basically start pushing some keystrokes or creating keystrokes in your computer. Okay? And really, it's quite fast. So you just need some like couple of seconds or minutes to have the access to the computer, locked in computer, for example, and just plug in the USB device. It will start some code, PowerShell script, and so on, extract some data, copy it back to this device, and it will just unplug it. You can also use this device even in the locked sign-in screen, like login screen of the Windows operating system, because you can use it as the brute force to the password, for example, or to harvest the NTLM hashes that are trying to be sent from the operating system to the network, and then just extract the data from those hashes and log into the computer. Of course, it's not so easy as I just said, because when you have complex passwords and you are not using NTLM, it's not so easy, but it can be used. So the subtitle of the local attack is the cracking the BitLocker. So how can I access data that are stored in the protected drive using the Microsoft BitLocker Drive Encryption, BDE? The first thing is when you are using just the software protection. So for example, you are just protecting the BitLocker keys with the password, with the pre-authentication password or startup key, or different names it has. You can just dump the memory of the computer, or you can do it even from the live running computer. You can dump the memory. So I already done it, and as you can see on the left side of the screen is a screenshot with the volatility script, which is a Python script, where I'm just taking the raw memory dump with the right profile, and I'm extracting the keys that should be or that are used by the operating system to access the BitLocker. As you can see in the third row, you can see there is a full volume encryption key, just quite a big key. And when I got this key and I got the drive, I can just unlock the drive and access the data. But when you are using the TPM to protect those keys, these are securely stored in the TPM chip. And it's quite hard to attack this chip, because when you try to put it out from the motherboard, it will just damage. It's really sensitive kind of hardware. So as you can see on the screen, which is another POC, try to take a look on the Google TMP sniffing, you will find some guy that was trying, or it's working still, it was trying to access the data that's going directly in and out from to the TPM chip. And as you can see, it just connected the virus to those different connection ports of the TPM chip, and underneath the screen of the motherboard, you can see that this is a binary code, basically representing the voltages that are going through the TPM chip, and then it was able to extract those codes, and then extract those full volume encryption keys, and then unlock those BitLocker drives. So then I got local access. Of course, I can do this, for example, on the running operating system. It was the running computer. So another big point is to use some credential extraction scenarios to get to the user's identity, and therefore extract data from the not from the computer, but from other services where those documents or data are stored, for example, OneDrive, SharePoint Online, Dropbox, I don't know, Office 365, email, and so on. So that's a quite old topic, because these credential extractions that can be used, for example, for pass the hash attacks and so on, it's here for a while. And I think that you already know the tool called Mimikatz that can be used to extract those data. You can see those Mimikatz screenshots in the red and green pictures on the presentation, and so that's basically extracting the passwords not in the clear text but in some hashed form from the memory. But the main magic in the Windows operating system, the standard configuration when you are not using, for example, virtual smart cards or smart cards and so on, is that you don't need a password in the clear text, because you only need the hash, and the hash can be used to authenticate to different services and so on, to even create hashes for other users and so on, like golden ticket scenarios and so on. But there are still a lot of scenarios when you have those credentials nearly in the clear text in the memory or on the disk. So for example, when you are initiating the RDP connections and you are saving the connection file, and the password, your credentials, the password is stored locally. Of course, they are protected with some DPAPI, for example, or DPAPI NG, using the system keys and some entropies and so on. But still, this can be reversed back to the password in a clear text or even to the hash. It's quite easier to extract those clear text passwords from stored websites, because these are stored in Windows Credential Manager or Windows Credential Store. This can be harvested with I don't know, hundreds of different tools that can be used to harvest the clear text password from the Credential Manager. And of course, another type that's not right in the presentation, but I was just writing the notes, so just to focus on the different scenarios. But when you connect to the RDP session on the target server, for example, it's the jump server. So you are just initiating RDP connection from your laptop to some jump server that's running on the Windows remote desktop services. And then from the jump server, you are accessing, for example, Active Directory to configure some groups and so on. So when you access this, when you connect in a default way to this RDP server, on the target server, on the terminal server, there are your credentials in a full form. So there are your NTLM hashes and so on, Kerberos credentials and so on, because they need to be there to allow you to go to the network. So to use some kind of delegated administration mode, you need to get those credentials to the remote system, and then from the remote system you get further to the network. And of course, it's the only way how to do it, or it was the only way how to do it, because you need the full form passwords or full form credentials in the memory. Otherwise, it will be the double hop and it will be blocked and so on, because you don't have your passwords in the memory. How to protect against this? Basically, there are two protections. One of them is restricted admin, and the second one is the remote credential guard, it's called. In the restricted admin, it says that when you access the RDP server, there are no more your full credentials. Yeah? So, but still, you are blocked to access another network resources. so it's quite hard to use it. It can be configured in some way, but it's quite hard to use it. So another thing it's quite new is the remote credential guard, which basically uses the technology that will pass through your Kerberos tokens and your hashes from the client to the RDP server, but they are not stored on the RDP server. So they can be used by the applications or tools that are running on the RDP server to the target systems, but they are not stored on the RDP server itself, like on the jump server and so on. So let's get back to the client operating system. When you are logging into the computer using, it doesn't matter if you are using password or biometrics and so on, because when you are not using Windows Hello for Business, there's still like the password authentication is somehow it's somehow related only to the specific device, because it's some kind of token binding, but still it's in the memory. And it's stored in the LSAS process, which stands for Local Security Authority Subsystem, which holds all those hashes. And you can use, for example, Mimikatz to extract those hashes. So as you can see on the red picture, I got extracted the NTLM hashes, for example, for my corp admin account. When you want to protect against those kind of attacks, the simplest way is to, for example, configure the anti-malware to block all those kinds of different software that can extract the data. But it's quite hard today because the software is like mutating to the different forms or using some obfuscation techniques to hide against those detection systems. So we got a better technology today, which is called Credential Guard. Credential Guard basically use the virtual secure mode technology, which is powered by the Windows hypervisor. And in the VSM architecture, you got something like separated kernel and separated user mode that's running in some kind of container. It's not the virtual machine, as it's quite. You can find a lot of websites when this technology is described. It's the same as the virtual machine. It's not true. It's not the same as the virtual machine. So there is some kind of container that's running all those processes that holds those critical informations like cryptographic sensitive information and so on. So as you can see in the yellow box, there is a virtualization-based security, and there is a process LSI ISO which is holding those hashes. So when you install and configure the Credential Guard, you got this separated process that's storing those cryptographic sensitive information. So you are not therefore able to extract those information from the memory. As you can see on the green picture, there's the Mimikatz that's running on the different system, and this system is employed by the Credential Guard, protected by the Credential Guard. So as you can see, I'm not able to extract those hashes. Of course, Mimikatz is somehow clever to detect that there is a LSA local security isolated process, and there is some NTLM hash, but the hash is encrypted in the memory, so there is no way how to extract it. But there is one way how to do it. You need to install some driver. Mimikatz can do it, of course, as well as the built-in feature. You can install the driver basically to the underlying layer of the operating system, to the hypervisor, basically, let's say it this way, and then you got the access to the secured partition, to the secured kernel, and then you can extract the data. But how to protect against this? Basically, the only protection against this is the kernel mode code integrity or hypervisor enforced code integrity, and to use secure boot, of course. The problem of this approach is that when someone tries to load this driver to the hypervisor is not protecting like in a live way against those configurations. So it's okay for the hypervisor to install some kind of this driver, but to use this driver, you need to load it to the memory. And the load to the memory is done only during the computer boot process, so you need to reboot the computer. But when the computer is configured with the device guard, exploit guard, some features, for example, with the application control to enforce the integrity of the applications, basically the computer will stop booting. And you will end up with a black screen that's saying this computer is not in the state that's capable to to continue with the boot because it's somehow configured or deconfigured, and it's running maybe some like malicious driver and so on. So you can definitely create some like denial of service attack using this approach, but you are not able to extract the data, so that's the key. Another topic is, or the last topic is the fileless malware. Today there is a lot of attacks are done using the phishing still. Users are receiving different emails with attachments or like malicious links to those malicious websites, then hosting malicious code, and users are clicking on this and running those codes in the memory in the user context. So it's not a big harm to the computer itself, but it can be like quite a big issue for the data of the customer, of the user, because the code has access to everything that the user has access and has the right to everything that the user has access right. So it can basically encrypt, for example, all files on the desktop or documents on the file share and so on. The problem with the fileless malware is that basically there are nearly no traces on the disk of this malware because it's running purely in the memory, and typically it's using some kind of like native languages that are built into the operating system. The term for this it's running directly from the code that's available, or for the engines that's available in the operating system. So usually it's using PowerShell, VPS, and those languages are started, for example, in the like website scenario, for example, starting with the JavaScript. So it can be initiated basically in two ways. From the browser, when you visit the malicious website, and you don't need even to click on any buttons. You just need to load the website, and it will start some JavaScript code that will initiate the shell code, that will start PowerShell, and the PowerShell will start some malicious code that will, I don't know, encrypt your data or harvest the data and so on. The second scenario is that you are opening some like component of the operating system, or you are running the application that's opening the file that you have on the drive or that you received with the email as the attachment. And this file can contain some like malicious code. So the application itself it's not malicious. It's your regular application, for example, Excel files, but the document or the file contains some like malicious structures. So quite an easy to use scenario is the Excel macro files or Excel macro scenario. So you get the Excel file that contains some macro, and this macro can contain maybe even the obfuscated code, and then run something on your computer. Like, it's quite different. So how to protect against those? So quite a big protection can be provided with the anti-malware. So today Windows Defender Anti-Malware, which is the built-in Windows Defender antivirus in your operating system, contains the feature that's called AMSI, which is like detecting the code or trying to detect the containment of the code and try to detect some like strings that can be used to detect it. This is not the right command. You shouldn't be running the invoke, mimic, PowerShell command and so on. You shouldn't be able to. You shouldn't be running this kind of code structure. You shouldn't be running this URL in the script because this is the malicious URL and so on. So it's quite a great protection built in the Windows anti-malware solution. And as well, quite a good protection is built into the browser because using, for example, smart screen features or JavaScript encryptions or JavaScript enforcement and so on, this browser can protect you from running these like malicious codes from the JavaScript files. To block or to protect against those like malicious applications, it's quite okay to use Windows App Blocker or Application Control, Windows Defender Application Control in the news operating systems. And to protect against this like malicious code itself, if it's running, for example, PowerShell, you can use configuration that's called constrained language mode in the PowerShell that's defined using, for example, using the group policy or some like system variable. When you configure the PowerShell engine to block it from using non-standard PowerShell commands or commands or command lines and so on, or script structures and so on. So when you enforce the constraint language mode in the PowerShell, you are no more able to use, for example, .NET classes or .NET objects inside your code. And because a lot of malicious code contains those code structures, it's automatically blocked, so you are safe against the invoke mimikatz and so on. Even if it's obfuscated, it's still blocked because even the obfuscated code is only translated to the call of some like .NET classes or .NET objects, but these are blocked by the PowerShell itself. And of course, you can try to like avoid this kind of like protection, but it's quite hard because you need to modify the running operating system, you need to have the local admin rights and so on. So basically, we are building another fence between the user data and the malicious content. And the last thing on the phallus malware is that you should definitely need to detect this, but you are not able to detect this and therefore protect because the code is already run in the memory. So the thing is that you need to log it. The PowerShell logging is a very great feature. You can configure it starting with the Windows PowerShell version 5. You can configure it using the group policy, and we've got three basic configuration. First one is transcript logging, so everything is done, it's rated down to the log file on the disk. The second thing is to turn on script logging, so each and every script that's run by the PowerShell is logged as an event to PowerShell event log. And the third configuration is the PowerShell module logging, which does nearly the same way as the script logging, but you are logging the code structures. So even if the code is obfuscated, you can see the event in the event log with the obfuscated code, and then another event with the translated, de-obfuscated code, because this is the code that was actually run by the PowerShell engine. So using this module logging, you get really good information about what's going to be or what was run on the operating system, and you can try to protect another computers against those like malicious codes and so on, or you can try from where it's coming from and so on. So that's the phallus malware. I get just two examples of this. So first one is the Word document. It's containing some macro. As you can see, this macro holds the malicious code even if it in itself, and it's obfuscated, but as you can see, it's running the Windows shell run command, and that's starting to download or install the MSI Windows installer that was downloaded from some malicious website. So that's the first scenario. And the second scenario is quite sophisticated because this is the Excel file that contains the macro. The macro has the obfuscated shellcode. The shellcode is run, but the shellcode is not malicious. It's malicious, but it's not so bad for the computer because it's not changing anything on the computer. But this malicious code is downloading another code from the malicious website, from the malicious repository, and then directly mounting the code or putting the code to the memory and then running the code inside the memory itself. So this has only some additional cell to download the code. So when you take a look to the shellcode, it's only downloading some files from the web, but the downloaded content itself, that's the malicious code that can do the big harm to the computer. So that's all from my side. If you want to see more or if you want to learn more, I will be glad to see you on our trainings, on our courses. There are two URLs. First one is for the security trainings. You can see the list of the security trainings on the right-hand side of the PowerShell of the PowerPoint window. And the first training, which is the Windows Cyber Attacks and Defense, it's my own training, and basically this is the 5-day variant of the more deep discussions and demos and labs that's similar to this webinar. So if you want to learn more, definitely go to my training and you will learn more. I will see you different techniques. I will show you how to configure the Windows to protect against those attacks and so on. And on the left-hand side, you can see EC Council trainings. And the big point is for this that when you buy the training, you also get the voucher for the certification. So you can then try to get a certification of those defined EC Council certs. So if you have any questions, please write it down to the chat window. I will try to answer them now. And okay. So if you have any questions, try to write it down to the chat window. I will try to answer it now. Or if you don't have any questions now, just send me email later to the email address that you can see on the PowerPoint slide, jan@cyberangels.com, and I will try to answer you or try to at least give you some direction how to get to the information that you are looking for. So, do we have any questions? It looks like we don't have any questions. Okay, so no questions right now. So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to see you on our training. So have a good day. Bye.